Hello, welcome to Ms. Collins' video on piecewise functions. So we're going to start off by just evaluating piecewise functions. So right here is what a piecewise function looks like. It says given f of x equals, and it has more than one case, okay? So it says 2x minus 1 if x is less than or equal to 1, and 3x plus 1 if x is greater than 1. So right now we're just going to talk about evaluating this function, and then we're actually going to go onto the notes, onto the next page, and talk about graphing it. Okay, so first it says, well, what if x equals 0? We want to evaluate if x equals 0. Because 0 is less than 1, we're going to use the function that describes that. So here it says we're going to use, basically this says we're going to use this if x is less than or equal to 1, and we're going to use 3x plus 1 if x is greater than 1. Well, 0 is less than 1, so we're going to use 2x minus 1. Okay, so we're going to plug this in here. So I'm simply going to evaluate f of 0 by substituting 0 in to that expression. So f of 0 equals 2 times 0 minus 1, which when we solve, we know is just negative 1. So this states that when x equals 0 for this function, my solution will be negative 1. Next case B says, well, what if x equals 1? Well, because 1 equals 1, I'm going to come back up here, and once again, that's going to be my 2x minus 1 expression or equation, because it's stating that if x is greater, or if x is less than or equal to 1. So it's equal to 1. So I'm going to use 2x minus 1 once again. And when I do that, I have f of 1 equals 2 times 1 minus 1, which is just 1. Okay, so f of 1 equals 1. Then I come down to my last case here, and it says, what if x equals 4? Evaluate f of x for x equals 4. Well, 4 is greater than 1, so I'm actually going to switch this up this time, and I'm going to use my other equation, 3x plus 1, because x is greater than 1. But I'm still going to follow the same process and substitute in 4 as my input in my function. So it's just a different equation, but I'm still following the same process. So f of 4 equals 3 times 4 plus 1, which is 13. And that is all for evaluating. That should help you enough to try down here. So when you come in tomorrow, I'd love to see this. Now, flip the page. I'm actually going to help you with graphing as well. So hopefully you haven't stopped my video by now and you're going to watch this part as well. So here, later in the unit, I'm actually going to ask you to draw these, but here we're going to go backwards and look at a graph and say, okay, what are the equations with this graph, right? So the easiest ones, I believe, to start with are your x equals and your y equals. So here is a horizontal line, which means I have a y equals graph. And my y equals 3, because it's crossing 3 here. It looks like these are going up by 2's, right? 2, 4, 6, 8. So it's crossing 3 here, which means my equation is y equals 3. Now, you don't have to write y equals because that's what your f of x stands for. So instead here, I'm just going to write 3 and pick a fun color, and I'm going to write 3. Okay, now there's some terms here. This is a different looking graph, obviously, right? So my terms have to do with my closed and open dots, just as we've discussed before. Okay, so here it's equal to negative 4. And it's equal to 4. This is actually an and inequality. So we're combining what we learned before. Well, x is greater than negative 4, but it's less than 4, right? So these are the conditions of this piecewise. So I can write this in interval notation right here. This states that x is greater than or equal to -4 and x is less than or equal to +4. So this is interval notation. I can write this in. This gives me my terms of my piecewise when y equals 3. Now, when it comes to these lines here, when they're not horizontal and vertical, it becomes a little more difficult because we do have to write an equation in slope-intercept form or point-slope form, but slope-intercept form is definitely my recommendation. So we have to almost look at this line as what would it be if it was fully extended, and then what are the conditions why I'm cutting it off. Okay, so the two things that we need in our line are our y-intercept and our slope, right? So I'm going to start over here. Yes, I redrew this one. Please redraw it on yours because it was not pretty and too messy for us. Okay, so let's look at this one first, actually. I'm first going to look at my y-intercept. So to find my y-intercept, I'm going to have to see where it crosses the y-axis. So I'm going to have to eventually extend this. So it actually might be easier to first look at your slope, okay? So my slope here is, well, I can go up 1, 2 over 1, right? So my slope is 2. All right, so that's part of my equation here. My slope is 2. And then I'm going to have to extend this to find, so I'm going to have to now go down 1, 2 over 1. Oh, I found my x-intercept, but I want to keep going down 1, 2 over 1, and bam. There's my y-intercept. Okay, so my y-intercept I see would be at -4. Okay, that's important for my equation, so I'm going to write that down, and then I'm going to write down the conditions. Well, I know that my slope is 2x minus 4. Okay, and my conditions are, well, I have an open dot here, which means it's not equal to. It is just saying that x is greater than 4. Why? Because it's going this way. It's going towards the numbers greater than 4. It's not including this part of my graph. Okay? And lastly, if we come down here, we have a similar looking line. I'm going to start with my slope, and then I'm going to extend it to find my y-intercept. So my slope is down 1 over 1. Okay? I can follow it again. Down 1 over 1. Which means to find my y-intercept, I'm going to go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Oh, my y-intercept is 0, so I don't even need to write it. And my slope is 1. Okay, so bear with me. I know the graphs are a little off on here, like I said. This is just an example, but my slope is 1, right? So I just have x. I don't need to write plus 0. Now my conditions, once again, it's an open circle, so it's not going to be equal to, it's just going to be less than or greater, and it looks like it's going towards the negative numbers. It's just saying none of these numbers up here, just numbers less than -4. So my conditions are x is less than -4. And of course, you got to include the ifs in all of these as well. Okay, so I hope that gave you a nice little starter on piecewise functions and graphs, and hope you enjoyed.